Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Veriff Voices, the podcast where we talk about tech, identity verification, compliance, fraud, and all things IDV. Joining me today is Andrew Allen, VP of Marketing from Crossover. We've got a very exciting conversation planned today. I know that there's one of the sort of the mega trends of the last decade or so has been the switch to remote work. And Andrew's company, Crossover, are deeply involved in all of this and what it brings here. So, Andrew, I think I'll hand over to you to do a little bit of intro to just yourself, first of all, really. I guess a little bit about you, about your role. I know you've got a very interesting story of how you sort of came to be working at Crossover. So maybe let's start with that, and we'll get into the detail later.
All right, let's do it. Nice to be here. Hey, Chris. So yeah, I'm Andrew Allen. I work for a company called Crossover, which is a remote work recruiter in the tech industry. Before that, I actually was working in Broadway. I was living in New York City. I'm from New Zealand, so my accent floats around quite a lot. But I've moved around a bunch. I lived in New York for 5 or 6 years. I thought I'd be there forever. And living the dream, working on Broadway. Storytelling's always been my thing. But then the pandemic hit, and it made sense to move back to the other side of the world since I had a passport for the place with no COVID. And I didn't know how long I'd be here. It really depended on the work situation, but I stumbled across a company called Crossover, which hires remote workers around the world. And there was this amazing VP of marketing role going that just had my name all over it. The qualification process was really quite challenging. They have a whole bunch of tests. It feels like you're trying to join Mensa or something. But lo and behold, I got a job offer within a couple of days. And 3 years later, I'm still loving everything I get to do here. So sort of an unusual journey led me to land on my feet here at Crossover.
It certainly is, and I think that I can safely say that you're the only guest we've had that has a Broadway experience on this podcast so far. So this is a first. But so tell us a little bit more about Crossover then, because it's a really interesting company, and I think it's kind of sort of emblematic, really, of some of the changes that have happened over, in the world of work over the last 10 years, last 5 years, I suppose, exacerbated with COVID. But so tell us about it. Tell us exactly sort of what the company does, what the USP is, and so on.
Yeah, it's a super interesting use case. So Crossover is a remote recruiter, predominantly in the tech fields, hiring people from all over the world to work for fully remote companies. So I joined at the beginning of 2021, so we were already mid-pandemic, and the worldwide shift towards remote work had already started. But Crossover was founded between 2010 and 2014. They were like way pre-pandemic. Founded on the realization that a whole lot of innovation and moving forces were going to lead inevitably towards remote work. So even without the pandemic, that would have happened. So we've got internet speed going up. We've got Wi-Fi. We've got connectivity in the third world increasing. We've got cloud operated software, so people no longer need to sit at a desk in order to access the files that they need to do their job. And so there was sort of an inevitable shift towards being able to work from anywhere. And so the founding idea behind Crossover was that that's an opportunity to hire the best people in the world and not just the best people who live nearby. And so that the most exciting thing that any company could do for the quality of their talent was to expand their hiring radius to the entire globe. That's a really big idea, though, but it's full of big problems. For example, like, how do you compare two people if one of them went to Harvard University and the other one went to the University of St. Petersburg or Santiago or Lagos? Do you judge someone based off of what you can find in their resume? Do you just assume that if they went to a good school, that probably aligns with the quality of their talent? So Crossover started doing a whole bunch of stuff to figure out, well, how do you actually vet people? How do you actually objectively compare and shortlist applicants when you don't have all the familiar data points that you would if you're sitting in HR interviewing people that are all from your hometown? And so there's a whole bunch of challenges associated with that, and you've got like fraud issues. In the early days, they literally had people logging on who would outsource their job to someone else. And so another person would be logging on every day and doing the work. And they're just, clipping the ticket in the middle.
Yeah.
They had people try all kinds of things. People moonlighting jobs, so they would be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'm working for you," but actually, on at the same time, they've got four other companies who think they work full time for them, and they're just kind of splitting the difference. So we have absolutely seen it all in that space. And now the mature crossover that exists today has come up with a bunch of solutions to solve those problems so that we can be sure that the people who we actually hire, who we place with forward-thinking companies who are ready to hire someone in a fully remote capacity, we can actually guarantee those people are the cream of the crop, the top of the game, and better value talent than they're going to find for that price tag
Yeah.
if they hire locally.
It is a remarkable company, actually. And I think that if you think of the biggest organisations in the world these days, they all describe themselves as global companies, right? So I think that just limiting yourselves to the talent pool that happens to live within a 20-mile radius of your headquarters seems a bit bit limiting. So I should imagine that the use case you've got is really is very very compelling to those sorts of companies. But tell me a little bit about more about that sort of client base. Then, what sort of types of companies is it that are sort of mostly using your services?
Yeah, so it's companies in the tech sector. We've got a lot of like rapid growth startups. Some of our largest clients are companies that were founded way back in the 80s, alongside IBM and Microsoft, and actually had a certain pedigree. I'm talking about Trilogy when I say that, who's our biggest client and a company that's in the same family as us. They're probably the outlier, but the most notable company. But yeah, companies in the tech sector that are rapidly growing and might be experiencing some kind of cap on the talent that's available to them locally. Obviously a few years ago, there was talk about, being unable to find high quality people in Silicon Valley. There was, the rules of supply and demand were swinging in such a direction where companies were just crying out for great people and unable to find them. An interesting answer to the question more recently that we're finding is companies that are outside the traditional tech sectors. So they've got a really cool idea. We've got a company that's in Ottawa, Canada, and there's just not a lot of people nearby. So they have a fully remote model, and so crossover was a natural fit for them. We didn't have to convince them of the how wonderful it would be if they were remote. They were already on that train. We just had to fulfill their need to find great people and ensure that those people were actually who they said they were, and would do the work and do a great job.
Well, that's a very good segue into what we want to sort of talk about next, actually, which is the sort of how you came to sort of find Veriff, I suppose. And I think you mentioned at the beginning there some there's the early stages, some of the fraud that you experienced there, and then leading into sort of just verifying people are who they say they are, I suppose, and all that kind of thing. So that presumably is the main business driver from your side as to why you sort of needed a tech solution that would help you with that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about hiring someone, right, the universal symbol for hiring someone is a handshake. The job interview. Congratulations, you've got the job. When you're 100% remote, there's no handshake. You don't meet these people day in and day out. You don't have that kind of trust that accumulates over time with people in the same building where you can see a lot of what's going on without having to check. So one of the big challenges with hiring people all over the world when you've never met them was, what do we do about trust? We need to be able to trust that if we're paying someone, they actually did work and they didn't watch cat videos all day. And we don't want people to be able to cheat our system. The entire thing would fall over if we were only hiring the people who were the best at manipulating our process and not the most talented. So trust was a huge kind of important but unknown factor in those early days. And it sort of stands to reason that the most base level of trust is verifying their identity. Making sure that we have KYC checks in place. And for us as well, some of the tests that we're doing in order to determine someone's cognitive aptitude, for example, is something that if they take the test every single day, they're going to get really good at taking the test, and it will no longer be measuring their cognitive aptitude. It'll be measuring how well they are at memorizing those questions. So we've got certain platform needs, like making sure people can't take the test every single day. We've got like a cool off period. After you fail twice, you've got to wait 6 months. Things like that would fall over if we couldn't make sure that we weren't allowing people to have multiple accounts. And so in addition to verifying the people we were actually hiring, there was sort of a need for us to make sure we also didn't have duplicate accounts. We didn't have people pulling the wool over our eyes. All of this came back to the need for a really high quality KYC partner. And we looked at our options, and Veriff just made the most sense.
That's good to hear. And I think it's a very interesting use case for us. We work with a lot of financial services companies, and obvious reasons that you need to verify for accounts there. So I think the same applies here in many instances, and it comes back to that sort of root cause around trust, I suppose. And when we think of financial services, the penalties for doing nothing are regulatory fines and potentially hugely damaging financial losses. What would be the main driver for you in terms of that? So the cost of no action on this, would it be sort of financial, or is it more sort of reputational, or what would be the sort of the main driver there?
Our product would fall apart, honestly, if we couldn't verify that we were actually hiring the best people in the world, and not just the people who were the best at gaming the tests. If we couldn't verify that the person who was logging in all day and receiving the paycheck was actually the person who was doing the work. All of the things that Veriff provides for Crossover are really at that base level, where if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have a product, we wouldn't have a company. So they were at that mission critical layer for Crossover. It's not a nice to have it all. It's not about trying to be a little bit better or trying to get a little bit more profit. It is mission critical stuff where if it wasn't working, our business model would just completely fall over in days.
It's so interesting to hear that, and obviously we make the case to prospective customers a lot about there's a price of using Veriff, but that price versus the cost of doing nothing, or the cost of going with a cheaper alternative or something like that is really hard to measure sometimes. And I think that for a company in a use case like this one, it's pretty unique actually. Though I think it sort of holds true that what you have there is something that really is fundamental to not only success but to existence, really, to be totally honest, right? And just skipping back a little bit to when after you first discovered Veriff and decided you were going to make the switch there, if you like. Just talk me through that sort of early process of how things integrated with your systems and some of the early testing that you would have done, because I think that's something that other people listening to this might be in that same position of just a bit hesitant, nervous to take that first step, and what it would sort of entail and what it looks like.
Yeah, well, I've got to caveat this with saying I'm not an engineer. I didn't have to, pick up the wrench and get to work in order to implement this. But I worked very closely with my colleagues in our engineering team. Initially, we were going through and vetting the different providers and figuring out which one would make the most sense. So as someone in marketing, it was important to me that it was going to be really intuitive and easy, and we weren't going to see churn as a result of putting in a step that was so hard that people didn't want to complete it. My colleagues on the engineering side, they wanted to make sure that it was going to work every time. It was going to, think of the different use cases, and that it was going to be, dead easy to implement. And the great news for them, because I would have wanted it because it was the most intuitive solution, even if it wasn't the easiest from an engineering point. But the great news for them is that the answer led us to Veriff on both sides. And it turned out actually to be dead easy to implement as well. And that is a direct quote from my closest colleague in engineering, who is very reluctant to deliver a compliment of that size unless it really was an A+ experience.
That's good to hear. I think if we can keep the engineering guys happy, then we're doing our job. That feels to me to be the one.
This is a tough man to please.
It certainly is, yeah. What about sort of the impact of things then? Do you sort of feel like that this is in some ways a differentiator for you now, in a sense that you've got this robust system in place that possibly competitors don't have, or it's something that that is become a selling point for you in terms of how sort of solid your systems are, and how sort of what sort of protections you've got there to make sure that people aren't gaming the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of our B2B offer to clients, we're saying we're going to bring you the best shortlist you've ever seen. We're going to bring you Silicon Valley grade vetting. You're going to hire someone who you can trust from day one. We can guarantee that they'll actually be productive. whenever they're working. So we're making some really, really massive claims there. That is our point of difference, and the layer that Veriff provides in terms of the identity verification is really important to that promise. And if you compare that as well to the rest of the marketplace for us, in terms of our competitors, a lot of the times you're looking at gig workers where I won't name names in terms of the companies, but there's plenty of companies where you can log in and just hire someone to complete a few tasks, or come on board for a few weeks or part time, and really with those companies you are making your decision almost entirely based off of the number of reviews the person has, and whether their past clients were happy, which is a scary prospect when you're talking about hiring someone in the senior levels of your organization. Like, do you really want a CTO just on the basis of having over 4-star reviews and other people being happy? Like, there's I can understand how you might pick an Uber driver that way, but we're talking about the talent that's going to be working for you day in and day out, the people who are critical in ensuring whether your business is going to achieve its goals or not. Like, why cut corners? Why take shortcuts on something so critical? Business has always been won and lost on the quality of the talent. So that's our message. That's what we feel. And the extra work that we do to vet the people that we are putting in the chairs of our clients versus our competitors who just kind of say, oh well, try this one, I seem all right. It's pretty critical to our message, and Veriff's part in that is super important to us.
It's good to hear, and I think you're right. We sort of said at the beginning, it feels to me that this is the forefront of really what employment is going to look like in the future. It's that as you said about that, the classic symbol of the handshake. I think that maybe those times are behind us now, and the way that companies are able to hire folks from wherever they are in the world it has to be a really positive step, I think, and it allows people to people with talent in places that previously may have been overlooked to find jobs elsewhere, and there's a great sort of inclusivity angle to that as well, which I really really like. Just let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that you're in an ideal place really to talk about what the future may look like for this sort of industry. So how do you see things sort of panning out, both for crossover, but the industry at large when it comes to remote hiring and that kind of thing over the next year or so, next 2 years, and maybe even beyond that, if you want to sort of go for your crystal ball?
Yeah, well, there's so many ways that I could answer that question. I would say the way I'm going to choose to take is looking at the globalization of the talent market. So talent and recruitment has always been something local. We've talked about that a fair bit, but that is true even when you're looking at a macro level. And in terms of pay, for example, the going rate for an accountant in the Philippines is, I think it's in the range of like $8,000 a year, versus an accountant in the US that's going to get more than 10 times that. And that's true whichever country and vertical you're looking at. And so what we predict is a globalization that starts from the top down in terms of the most talented people. So if you are the best in the world, more opportunities will be available to you. You'll be able to access amazing premium jobs that are in a global talent economy, not your local talent economy. So that's a huge shift in terms of talent. The winners obviously would be the companies that are able to ensure that every single person on their team is an absolute legend, because they really have the pick of the bunch. They can hire someone. I mean, imagine how much someone wants their job when the alternative for them is something that pays 10 times less. So there's a clear reason why it's worth it for the individuals to sign up and be interested in the job. There's a benefit for the companies as well, because they get a lot more value for their budget. They're not paying any more, but they're getting their money goes a heck of a lot further and makes people a heck of a lot happier. When you look at that shift over time as well, towards a global talent economy, it also means that companies that are taking the opposite approach and are trying to outsource or trying to shortchange people and paid based off of the going rate in that country, get that accountant for $8,000. They're going to see diminishing returns as the best people get better and better opportunities, and people who are willing to accept a raw deal are in a pool that's getting smaller and smaller. So for us, a lot of our projections for the future come down to that view of the world globalizing, knowledge workers shifting towards remote jobs, and I think in terms of remote work as well, it's in many ways been in its infancy, and so much of the conversation has been focused on where people work. And so our vision of remote work is that actually most companies are distributed already. They already have solutions for people to interact. Most communication happens over email, Zoom, Instant Messenger, even for people that work for the same company. And so the right conversation becomes a lot less about where people work, a lot more about when, and a lot more about how. That's how we build company culture. That is how we expand to a worldwide workforce. And the work that Veriff is doing, enabling some of the gate opening problems like trust and identity to be resolved in a reliable way, is how we smooth over those sharp edges and make a future like that possible.
Yeah, that sounds great. And are there any in that future then? Are there any sort of challenges that would keep you and the other leaders at Crossover kind of keep you awake at night? Specifically in the world of fraud and that kind of thing. Is there anything there that you're sort of anxious about, do you think?
Anxious about? No, I wouldn't say I'm fearful about anything. I'm excited about bringing opportunities to people that live in overlooked places. People who are diamonds in the rough, who have incredible talents, and the only reason that they're not already working for a Silicon Valley company is because of where they were born. It's so wrong. And there's an exciting feeling about being part of the equalization of that, a part of the shift toward progress. I'll give you one example. I'm about to travel to Africa to film a couple of episodes of the podcast that I produce called Out of Office for Crossover. And I'll be filming a few episodes in Nigeria. And one of the reasons that I chose Nigeria is because the fraud risk there, the Nigerian scam, the message from the Nigerian prince with a check that you need to cash is a cliche, and we can laugh about that reality from our comfy spots in developed countries. But for someone from Nigeria who has no interest in committing any kind of crime, no involvement in any kind of scams, that mindset is super harmful for them. And so I'll be interviewing someone who had a lot of trouble getting hired. You can't. So many companies just will not look at talent from Nigeria because they'll go, okay, where are our fraud rates the highest? And unfortunately, certain countries, they'll just turn off the tap. That wasn't good enough for us at Crossover because we believe that there are great people everywhere, and we don't want to ignore the amazing people who just happen to be in an area where their colleagues might be committing higher rates of fraud. We instead wanted to build a good system that could tell the difference and ensure that someone who was awesome could prove that they were and get a job even if they lived somewhere that everyone else overlooked. And we were confident that if someone did try and pull the wool over their eyes, we'd be aware and we could do what we needed to do.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it harks back a little bit to that kind of inclusivity angle that we kind of touched on earlier. And was that a factor? I mean, one of the things we're sort of very, very proud of here at Veriff actually is the sort of the breadth, if you like, of our document coverage. I think we sort of cover more of the globe in terms of sort of government issued documents in our library than anybody else. It's up to about 11,500, I think, at the last count. So it's pretty impressive. Is that something that kind of came into the consideration when you were sort of thinking of making the decision to use Veriff? I mean, obviously because of you're taking workers from potentially anywhere in the world, I would think.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got over 7 million users in our platform. we've hired people from over 130 countries, and we've had applications from many, many, many more. So basically, if you name a country, Crossover is there on some level. And so in order to implement any kind of identity verification, it was absolutely critical that we would be able to tell the difference between a valid driver's license from Sierra Leone and an invalid driver's license from Sierra Leone, which is certainly something that I wouldn't be able to do even if I was holding the real thing, because who knows what that looks like. Thankfully, Veriff knows, and so we're confident that after implementing the identity checks that Veriff does for us, we've never had someone get all the way through to getting hired who wasn't completely honest about who they said they are, and that's just priceless.
Yeah, it's good to hear, and I think it's an incredible story. The company as a whole, I think, is absolutely amazing. I know we've spoken a couple of times now, and it's I'm still blown away by the idea and the fact that it's in some ways. Of course, that's the way that the world is heading. It seems so obvious, but those things don't seem so obvious when you're before it happens, right? I mean, it's one of those things that is there. Is there anything else then you'd like to cover off before we sign off? We've got a few minutes left, but it's. I mean, I think what can we expect to see from Crossover this year, for example? Is there any sort of big news on the horizon that we should be aware of?
Yeah, well, I guess what I would touch on for Crossover is the arrival of AI is such a game changer for everyone. And we are really excited to be on the forefront of implementing Gen AI across our business and working with our clients to figure out what that means for them as well. In terms of we've got testing. People can earn badges now on our system that show their expertise in the realm of Gen AI, and because of what we can do as well, the vast talent pool that we're working with, we're able to find people with subject matter expertise and Gen AI experience. Which is really exciting. In terms of what that means for the global talent pool, it's interesting seeing. I like to think of it as like a jetpack. The best people in the world suddenly have a jetpack strapped to them, and with the use of Gen AI, as well as their human skills to offset the parts that are imperfect, they're able to just shoot ahead. And so the gap between the best people in the world and someone who is in the middle of the pack is going to get exponentially wider in a way that we just haven't seen. So the most talented people will all of a sudden all be like Usain Bolt sprinting ahead. So for us, we see AI as a something that is inevitably becoming intertwined with what we're doing and with our story. But we see a lot of value in the role of an amazing, talented human to guide Gen AI as well, and to augment it so that there's a human touch as well. And so humans working alongside AI to do things that wouldn't have been done before is inevitably going to be something that we're talking more and more and more about in the coming years. But at Crossover, we think it just aligns perfectly with our model of finding these amazing superstars who can do that and don't get left behind.
It definitely does. And just while you were talking there, actually, it always strikes me whenever I have these sort of conversations with customers, how closely aligned culturally you are, the way you think about things with what's happening at Veriff as well. It's in some ways, again, of course it is. We sort of we work together, and there's going to be a natural sort of rub off there. But I think our approach to AI is exactly the same in the way that we're sort of building our fraud systems, everything else. It's sort of AI leading, but there's a layer behind it of sort of humans working in to sort of refine the models and make sure things work in the way that our customers want to and things like that. So it's always interesting to me that sort of cultural alignment, I think, between us and our customers. But no, it's very good. So listen, I think we're about out of time, actually. So I'll just say thank you very much for joining us, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I can't recommend highly enough the podcast you produce. It's Out of Office, I believe it's called, is it? And I think the episodes coming up from Africa, I'll be looking forward to, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure chatting to you. And if anyone does want to follow Out of Office, they can find that on the Crossover LinkedIn page. That's the easiest place to tune in.
Awesome. Thanks very much. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Take care.